Hi, everyone. Welcome to this month's episode of Dr. G's Think Tank on Resilience. I'm really glad that you're joining us. You are helping me tackle a topic that I've been pretty worried about, and that is AI, artificial intelligence. We hear a lot right now in the news, and I know that the media make their living off of stoking our rougher emotions, our fear, our anger, our worry. And I think they've done a pretty good job stoking our fear and worry about AI. So today I invited a couple of experts in AI to come and talk with us so we can figure out how to be resilient about AI and also how AI could actually help build resilience. Priyanka Rao is a certified AI trainer and the entrepreneurial founder of AI Champions, which is a pioneering firm dedicated to training leaders and teams in the strategic use of AI to enhance productivity. She has an extensive background in managing operations in furniture manufacturing, architectural products, the commercial property sectors. Priyanka, I want to welcome you, and I'd like to ask you, what do you find most exciting and also most frightening about AI?
What I find to be the most exciting is what I'm seeing with my clients is an uptick in productivity. The aha moments when people realize how accessible AI is to them and how it can help them into their both their professional lives and their personal lives, do things quicker and faster so they can focus on the things that they love to do. That's what I'm really excited about, and that's only getting better. What I find scary is the misuse of AI tools for unethical reasons, as well as cybercrime getting better and better, or cyber criminals getting more efficient due to AI as well. And I think there are ways in which we can protect ourselves, but there is definitely a scary element to the same people that are getting benefits from the tools are both on, I guess, the positive and the negative side of the world as well.
Yeah, the coin that I hear two sides of is accessibility.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to learn more about that accessibility in terms of how useful it can be. But I also hear you that it is that same accessibility that raises the risk in some ways.
Yes,
Okay.
it does. It does.
Okay. So I'd also like to introduce everyone to Malte Niebelschuetz. Malte is a social entrepreneur. He's the founder and CEO of a company called Shore Buddies that I think he might tell us a little bit about. Malte is a German native and moved to San Diego, California in 2011. He was inspired by Patagonia and started Shore Buddies in 2014. It's the world's first stuffed animal company made entirely from recycled plastic bottles. Malte is a leading AI expert in the toy industry. He keynotes on topics from business automation to process optimization. Malte, thank you for being here. And could you also please tell us what you find most exciting and most frightening about AI?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. What I find really most exciting about AI is that it kind of like levels the playing field for smaller teams by utilizing AI. You don't have to have like a massive workforce, to get certain projects done. And what I find most frightening, everyone here probably wants to hear Skynet is real, those kind of things. But actually, what scares me the most is that people are not utilizing AI because they're scared, right? So like it's kind of like when the internet came out, everyone was scared and they didn't know what it was and they avoided it. And I kind of like want to encourage everyone to look into it because it will be there for your benefit. And if you use it or not, you're going to get left behind if you don't.
So what scares you is our fears about it and how we're then freezing up and not being resilient about it. Okay, great.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Like
then
the
I've
deer in the
invited you
headlights.
here to help solve that very problem. So I'm really glad that you're here. And so I want to start with you. We will get to how can we be less scared of it. So let's start actually by talking about the advantages of it so we can see why we would take this on as something to learn more about. Like what I'm really hearing from both of you is this is accessible to everyone. This isn't something like I got to tell you, blockchain finance, I never learned a ton about. And I didn't have to. I understand that some people did, and they may have made lots of money from it or lost lots of money from it. But I could say that's probably for finance experts. I don't have to worry myself too much about that. I can see that it's confusing to me or frightening to me and set it to the side. But I hear both of you saying, probably this isn't something not only that I should set to the side, but probably I can't. If I'm going to live in the world, if I'm going to work in the world, if I'm going to raise children in the world who are then going to go out and deal with high school, college jobs. But just if I'm going to live in the world, I'm going to encounter AI. And so why would I bother? Malte, what is it about AI that could strengthen individuals' mental health and resilience, individuals' situation, as well as teams and companies?
I want to start with the individual, right? So like with the individual is like I feel, and especially for the last couple of years, since everyone is now working more and more remotely, which we actually have done with Sure Buddies for the longest time. So I'm really excited, like how AI helped our team even more than it was in the past, right? But like picture your typical remote worker, right? Like you're by yourself a lot of times, you're kind of like missing this office kind of like atmosphere, right? Where you have someone to bounce off ideas. And I think that's really where AI kicks in. So like as an individual, you can literally use AI as a sparring partner, right? So like you can bounce off ideas, you have something like you're not quite sure how it is, and like you really speed up the process instead of kind of like looking towards, okay, like I really need to become an expert in this field. No, you literally have an expert in any field at your fingertips, right? So like a typical chat GPT and all the other tools that are out there can be utilized at all times, right? So and the fun gets even more when you kind of like utilize those kind of things in a team, right? So like I feel learning and working more with AI is something that you can really utilize in terms of bringing the best out of ideas that you have and kind of like bringing the execution. I always have that saying that like there's no shortage of ideas, it's really the execution that matters, right? And I think AI is something like from how do I do this, and you have literally a task list, you have a plan how to kind of like execute this to really develop an idea. There's so many different things you can do there and like really bring it on. And on a really team level, as I said in the introduction, I think AI really can help for smaller teams or smaller companies to kind of like compete on a bigger scale. Like for us in the toy industry, for example, the automation that AI enables in the product space is just like unseen than before. I've always been a big fan of automation and process optimization, but AI really brings this to a new level.
Okay, I hear you and I believe you. I want to do a couple of things. One, I want to invite everybody in the audience to really think about what questions do you have that are coming up while we're talking. You can drop them in the chat. If you raise your hand and you want to unmute and ask a question or make a comment, we can do that. But I also, Malta, I'm going to push back a little bit because of what I don't know. Not because I'm knowledgeable about this the way you are, but because of a question that came up for me. I have certainly seen, and I teach medical students in the office regularly, and I have seen them go awry with AI. I have seen them assume that AI would be their expert. And what AI, as far as I can tell, is scraping huge amounts of data, but it can't always yet, at least, tell what's true. So you say you have an expert in everything, but it is also true that I might not know how to evaluate if it's correct. So I've seen stories about how AI can do really, really well on the LSATs, the test to get into law school in North America, but also how a lawyer used it to defend someone and it just got the law all wrong about something. So if I'm going to use it as an expert, if I'm going to say, boy, I'd love to know the best place to manufacture my new product, how do I evaluate if what AI is telling me is accurate?
Right. So that's a great question. I love that question. So it's really kind of like, right. So like we're using AI and we're having the expert on our fingertips, but what is it really true? And I came across actually those kind of things myself a couple of times, right? Where we had this kind of like, okay, we want to design a new toy and kind of like really go there. Like what I found is really is you can fact check AI like by itself, right? So like a lot of times it's really like how 100% accurate is this, right? You can literally ask the
So you
AI
just
back. It's
ask
like
it how
you just
right.
ask it how yeah, exactly. It's like
Like a
how is
patient,
this, right? And like
isn't it like
AI
a
tells
patient?
you like this is an assumption I just made.
That's interesting because I think about if I give a patient a diagnosis and they want a second opinion, they don't ask me how right I am. They go see someone else. And Priyanka, if you have thoughts about this, I can sort of see on your face, you have ideas. Jump in. Let's have a whole conversation.
Yeah.
I would get to the rest of what Malte wants to say, I promise.
Yeah. So if I was to jump in, I think that the word expert is the point of contention. I would flip it around completely. Microsoft has somewhat pioneered the word co-pilot. I think it's appropriate across the board. But
Co-pilot.
I see AI as sort of a co-pilot. It's beyond the brand, but it's a helper. It augments what you do. And I kind of want to talk about something that IBM said in 1979 in a presentation, which is, they said that a computer can never be held accountable, therefore a computer must never make a management decision. And so I really bring this up in my trainings, and I tell it to everybody I know, because if a machine can't be held accountable, there always needs to be, a human in the loop in any scenario, and especially with AI. And so I don't have any such fear of AI, because I always know at the end of the day, the output needs to be monitored by a human being. So everyone who feels like they're being disrupted by AI will inevitably become its supervisor. And so we just move up the value chain in terms of tasks that we do. And in terms of the piece around expertise and trust, I always look at the human in the loop, and I always look at my human experts to check the work of AI. And so right now, I don't believe any model, any AI output is 100% perfect, especially in medical fields or in legal fields. Models are trained on a lot of training data, but they have a lot of bias still, even though there are ethics committees and governance committees around that training data and how it's come out. So that's sort of my short view of what I feel where the situation's at.
Okay, so this is a really useful model for me to think about how I love the co-pilot idea, that it will be a helper and augment. Although, Malte, I do hear you saying it is more than just a helper, right? It knows stuff you don't know. A helper is somebody who you say, hey, do these things. And it's rarely, that person, if it's a person, is rarely going to do better than you would have if you took the time to do it. When we think about assistants, we think about them doing things we don't have time for, not that we don't have the knowledge or the skills for. And so this seems to be a mesh of doing something that maybe you've run out of ideas. I've used AI when I'm designing activities to teach a particular skill with a group of corporate learners. I'll say, what's a way that I could teach a group of 40 adults this skill? And it will give me 6 different ideas. And I notice often that I had 2 of those ideas, but I was looking for something else, and it has some ideas that I didn't. And then I evaluate them, to your point, Priyanka, absolutely. But Malte, you're saying it isn't only a system, for lack of a better noun, that can do things I could do, but I don't want to take the time to do. It also knows things I don't know.
Yes, so like I have to say, Priyanka, I really love the phrase of co-pilot. That's actually really excellent phrasing. So I will definitely adapt that, right? So like, but it kind of like goes into this, right? So like a co-pilot is an expert, right? If I have never flown a plane before, all of a sudden I have this expert who knows how to land a plane, right? It might be like a little bumpy ride, like it might be like not the perfect landing or something like that, but I know I have someone who it can least lands the plane, right? So like my point being is like I have an expert at my fingertips, pretty much at zero to no cost, with any knowledge that is kind of like out there, right? And then I can really go and check fact the AI itself. But I'm 100% on board. I always need the human element, you know, like if I really be there, it kind of like comes back to the phrase you pay what you get for, right? And there are certain AI models that are better than others, and I can train my own AI, you know, like if we go a little bit deeper than just like your chat GPT. So there's a lot of different elements, but I really think the co-pilot phrase really hits it on the head, right? So like if I've never been flying a plane, I don't want to do that without a co-pilot.
To your point, that sort of idea that then AI becomes a helper and sort of a knowledge base, but you're still very essential in that process. And I think that's like when we're designing workflows, both from an ethics perspective, but also from a practical perspective, someone also always needs to be there to kind of be the the check and measure, but AI is a really useful kind of partner or a co-pilot or a digital co-worker, whatever sort of words there are around it. But it's sort of not, I don't believe in that sort of let's replace the entire C-suite with AI philosophy. I believe let's replace certain tasks and workflows as long as someone's held accountable at the end of it. Otherwise, the company is held accountable. And so someone needs to actually, be responsible at the end of the day for the output of AI.
So I heard what you said, Priyanka, about the internet, right? That we used to look also at the internet. Like, I think you were the person who said that is a while ago, people said, well, I fear the internet, so I'm just going to stay away. And that became almost impossible. You have to work very hard to design your life in a way that you would avoid the internet entirely. And what I am taking from this conversation and my motivation for having this conversation is it seems that AI might be like that as well, that 10 or 15 years from now, or maybe 3 years from now, if you said, nope, I don't trust AI, I want nothing to do with it, you would have to work constantly to avoid it and keep it out of your workplace, your customer service interactions. I mean, a lot of us are dealing with chats now that are AI generated, whether we realize it or not. We're dealing, whether it's our bank or our internet phone provider or a place that, when we want to return our groceries or anything. So if that's true, if this is going to be something that will be pretty much ubiquitous fairly soon in developed countries at the least, then what we need to do is not figure out if, but how we're going to interact with AI. And one of the problems I think we might have is this messaging problem that you're pointing out, Priyanka, that when people think of it as replacing the C-suite, we think the robots will replace us. And then we get into the part of our brain, the amygdala, that is all about loss and distrust and discomfort. And I'm going to lose my job and I am going to be obsolete. And when we look at it as a tool or a set of tools, maybe Malte, to your point, a whole set of tools that are accessible almost to anybody. And I'm picturing congressional hearings in 10 years where we're trying to get rural AI instead of rural broadband, which has been a conversation in the US for a long time. How do we make sure that rural areas have access to the internet just as much as anyone in an urban setting? It'll be how much can we make sure that everyone in schools learn how to deal with AI in less advantaged school systems as in more advantaged school systems. So I'm hearing why we should do this is both it is a cheap or no cost way to level the playing field in a lot of ways in our company, to have access to marketing ideas, to have access to manufacturing solutions, to have access to automation and improving processes. And it's going to be everywhere. So we really need to. Am I summing that up correctly? Am I understanding that correctly?
I just want to also jump in, like AI or the sort of genesis of it isn't new. It sort of started in the 40s. It's had several goes at trying to get out there. Even process automation isn't new. In the 70s, there was sort of a dark period. Then in the 80s, I believe it was called expert systems. And so I think the reason why AI is having this moment right now is two things. Number one, the accessibility piece, which we've all, brought up. Suddenly we have a model which can do several things that are applicable to us and anyone can use them. You don't have to be a PhD in AI to figure out how to use AI, especially with no code bots. And the second thing is we've kind of found ways to work with machines that is a little bit more productive than in the past when they had views that AI would replace doctors and lawyers. And now we know that these systems are not robust enough to replace a human reasoning, judgment, thinking, and accountability of a doctor, lawyer, and all the other professions. So I think we're entering into an era where we're going to have healthier processes of how we relate to technology. But to your point, it is going to be inevitable and everywhere. And I think it's going to be a lot easier to access because I don't think we'll be using the word AI in 5 years. I think it'll just be technology. Everything will have AI. And so the idea of us having this conversation in 5 years, we're going to look back and go, I can't believe we actually called it AI. It was just how everything works.
Yeah, I wanna add to that a little bit. I think it's really AI has been around, like as you said, Priyanka, for like such a long time already, right? But like really the last 2 to 3 years, where it really became available on a public space and super easily accessible, right? And we're still like at the very beginning of the kind of movement, where it gets like integrated in all kind of things. And it's really like that's what I said at the beginning. Like my biggest fear is really that people are so scared of utilizing AI, right? So like I kind of seeing it more as it's a tool that you need to have in your toolbox, right? Sharpen your toolbox with AI. AI, at least not yet, and I don't think any in the foreseeable future will replace anyone, as long as you learn and understand how to work the AI, right? So like think about how we all now have our cell phones, right? So like this is something we kind of like got to used to. Like that was not a thing 20 years ago, right? We did not have the internet at our fingerprints at all times, at our fingertips at all times. And now we have that with AI. And it's really changing everything. So it really is changing everything. Like I was at a roundtable the other day where we talked about what's going to happen with like, you know, your typical internet search. Google revolutionized the search, how we like, you know, search on the internet, and is by far still the biggest market leader of yeah of a search engine on the internet. And now there's discussions happening. It's like, okay, AI will get into that. AI will literally be the task, and actually the new generations, the next generation, they're like barely using they're like barely using Google at their first access to find information anymore, right? They are looking on Instagram, they're looking on TikTok, they're looking on YouTube, like how to find things. And it's really changing towards AI, where I can literally ask prompts. It's like, give me the answer to this and that, create a business plan for me, develop a toy for me, give me, you know, an image of a building I want to build. You know, like it's all possible, but the human skill really, at least for the next couple of years, how to use AI, right? How to prompt the AI, how to interact with the AI, that you get out of it what you really want.
I think to take that a little bit further, you know, with all the proliferation of tools, I think people will use the right model for the right thing. Like the other day at MIT, I saw the CEO of Perplexity talk, and you know, they're calling that the Google killer because it's a completely different way and different models of how to use search.
Hang
And
on. I have no idea what you're talking about. What is it?
Perplexity. It's a tool that I love, and it's a really, instead of using Google, I use Perplexity. You put in a full sentence, and it gives you all of a summary of different sources of information and citations as well. I then take that and put that into Chat GPT, and then create all sorts of, you know, content from that. I actually did a
Is
talk on
it
it at an event
perplexity?
yesterday. Yeah. New
Okay.
ways of researching using different tools. And I find that I think that information at your fingertips, it's so correct. When you say that, we used to say just Google it, and now, or before that, encyclopedias, and now we have this enormous amount of tools using different methodologies, Perplexity being one. There's a whole bunch of very scientific research-oriented AI as well. But the enablement of those tools now being beyond researchers to, you know, people that are up and coming, I think it's going to cause a shift on how universities need to be delivering education as well, and high schools for that matter as well. But the exciting thing about
And
that,
kindergartens. I mean, this is
everything. It's the entire education system will need to be reinvigorated with AI, but it gives access to education to people who maybe couldn't have it before because it's so easily accessed at fingertips. Well, I mean, YouTube did a bit of that, but then you could have an AI system explain things and be a tutor at very low cost, and opens it
okay.
up to entire communities.
So then let me ask you, as we're talking about the ubiquity and the proliferation of tools, what do we do about the ethics? And I don't just mean from a policy standpoint in countries. I mean, as individuals in companies, how can we make sure that our folks are using this ethically, and also that we're not at risk of some of the cyber crimes you were talking about, Priyanka?
So I actually talk about this quite extensively, and it really starts at the top management, setting governance policies and HR policies. But HR and IT are suddenly quite need to be quite synchronized on how they work together in leadership of how to be the custodians of how AI rolls out in an organization. And that's not something that's cookie cutter; it's very nuanced. But companies need to actively give guidelines on how to use these AI tools instead of and be quite intentional on what tools they pick, rather than kind of just go towards the free tools and then kind of not give any guidelines on how to use them. I think we're in an age of relearning and reskilling where companies need to take an active hand to actually teach their teams on how to use these tools, but also be very, open-minded and open-ended, but very particular on how to engage with these tools from a governance perspective as well. Also on the implementation side, not use tools in a way that screens people, using AI to make decisions, AI to have biases against certain individuals. So and the EU Act is actually a brilliant act in terms of giving guidelines on ethical uses of AI.
Say that again. EU Act.
The EU Act that's just being passed now gives low risk to high risk implementations of AI, and is very much geared towards bias and ethics on an institutional and government level. But companies need to, especially European companies, will need to start to adhere to this. I feel like American companies should be looking at that as a benchmark of ethical uses of AI, and not roll out tools which may be at risk of the EU Act, because the American task forces could bring those onto the US at the drop of a hat as well.
It's interesting because, I work at a federally qualified health center, which is as close to the US gets to having universal health care. So we're meant to serve the underrepresented and underserved in our communities. And every tech guidance I've ever gotten from the health center, and we've been open 18 years, has been cautionary, admonishing, don't do this, don't touch that, don't open a website you don't already know and trust. I mean, very restrictive, nothing open-minded about it. And I would imagine that a lot of companies look at this and think, how would we put the genie back in the bottle? If we open this, we don't understand enough about it. We don't understand how to control anything that would come out of this. It seems like a lot of companies, especially small to medium-sized companies who weren't formed like yours was, Malte, with the idea of using AI intentionally, if they're adapting to it after they already have a business model in place, it's going to seem to them like the easiest thing to do is to just say no. And can you give the leaders who are with us right now or watching this later a couple of suggestions about how they might open up their own mindset and convince the other leaders they're working with to think about this differently than fear?
Yeah, I wanna add to like that a little bit, right? And I don't think the AI is the one who's making unethical decisions. I think those are human
Right.
beings, and
This
I
is like guns don't
completely
kill.
agree with
Right.
Priyanka. That comes from this comes from the top. It literally comes from the top, right? So like we live in a world. I was just recently in Buenos Aires and I learned about the dark history of Argentina, like back in the 70s and 80s, where they tortured and literally killed people that were against the government, the political administration at that time, right? And those things are kind of like still happening. They are false flag terrorist organization. There's like a lot of war happening on this planet at the moment still, and those things coming from people, right? Those are human beings who are actively making those decisions. That's not an AI, and it will never be an AI who is doing that. So a good friend of mine, Dr. Gustavo, he wrote a whole book on that, and it literally says culture trumps everything. So I think it's very, very important for every organization, not only companies, but for every organization to really define that culture and put those ethical standards in there, right? It's a sort of corporate governance, if you will, that you have to establish, and that includes AI, right? So like if you have ethical standards, if you have ethical values, you will keep executing on them, and this includes the way you elaborate AI, right? Because if you're an ethical company, you will make the right decisions, and your AI that you utilize within your organization will make those right ethical organization. But it has to come from the top, right? So like it's literally in German they have a saying: the fish smells from the head, and that's literally true. So like you have to make sure your organization has those ethical values, and AI is just one next tool that has to apply to those those values you define.
I mean,
That
just
is
to
an
expand on
excellent
that,
point.
it's such a good point. I would look at how companies dealt with social media. because some companies dealt with it very well. They had policies in place on what you could say and can't say about work, and how the usages at work on social media on company devices. And so I think the companies that did that well will likely roll out AI well and do it intentionally and have some guidelines and be quite get ahead of it. But I think companies that would take a back step and then fire people for saying inappropriate things on social media without giving them guidelines, they're the ones that'll probably roll out AI in a similar manner. Or maybe they've learned. But that's a good technological shift that we had. And it's a good way to observe how do companies react when that technological shift occurred.
Okay, I have two more questions I want to ask you both before we start to wrap. One is a question that came in it's a very basic question. I think it's incredibly useful for most of us. This person said, I've been meaning to learn how to use AI, but I never know how or where to start. And that's usually why I stay away. So for someone who really is totally naive to this, but open-minded about it, where would you want them to begin, Priyanka?
Ask yourself, what is it that you want to do? Or even prior to that, learn about what AI can do and then find a simple application in your life. I'll give you a simple example. If you are out there in the professional world and you're constantly writing LinkedIn posts, something like a ChatGPT or a Claude could be a really good way to help you automate or help you output more content. Just, watching a couple of YouTube videos or looking up some basic blog articles about how to converse with these tools or how to prompt could actually help you just start. And it's one of those things that's very easy to use, and maybe it takes some work to master, but just start is my advice.
And in that same way, so I hear you two things in that. One is use a tool you're already comfortable with, like a blog or someone you trust or YouTube, to learn about this new idea, and then make it your co-pilot. Don't just give it the reins and say, well, now it's going to automate whatever it posts. I wonder, I'll open my own LinkedIn and read what I posted because I didn't know what it would do, but rather use it as your helper.
It's a helper. Give it a job is how I tell people in my trainings. Like, give AI a task, and then that's the task that you give AI. In the same way that when we get robot vacuums, there's suddenly a part of your cleaning process, if you have it in your home, is that you need to turn on the robot vacuum to do that thing. You're not going to go and do the task that it did. So you have to give AI a job and then use the right tool for that job.
I cannot tell you, as a mom of four people from the ages of 15 to 21, how much I see in my own social feeds about, I can't believe I have to answer the question, what's for dinner, every night for the rest of their childhood. And so this is a great example of something that I could hand over to AI, because I'm not going to cook something I know they'll hate or that is too expensive or too hard. I'm going to look at it and say yes or no. So this way I make it my helper. And it's just like having a partner who, if you said, what should we make for dinner tonight, it would actually answer you with recipes and a grocery list, instead of saying, I don't know, what do you want?
And dietaries as well.
Right.
Dietaries, if you're doing birthday party planning, if you want to make ideas for kids' activities, if you want to help your kids prepare for tests, there's lots of applications. Yeah, so many ways in which you can use it.
Okay, so here's my last question for both of you, but Malte, I'll start with you, that is on this, how do we do this well topic. And that is this: a lot of my interest, because resilience focuses on strengthening mental health of individuals and teams. Is there a way, and I hear you about productivity and time saving and cost, is there a way that you see that AI could build mental health in employees and in teams?
I do really think so. I really do think so. I feel like mental health is obviously, and we're getting into May, the MASH months, where a lot of people actually feel very lonely, and feel overwhelmed with tasks, like in a job situation, at home situation, right? You just address the dinner plan for a whole week to make up family, right? Like, I feel alone with a task. Like, how do I handle all of this, right? Who can I ask? Who is like the expert in that, right? Like, I have to research that myself, and like I have to get into that. Where do I even start, right? So, and that's kind of like also how to, like, go into and learn about AI. It's really just get started, and it's such a easy way to do it. Such a low entrance barrier, right? So like, I think AI will really help a lot of people not to feel that overwhelmed anymore, not to feel that lonely anymore, and help kind of like navigate to finding right answers to like very, very easy tasks, because it's so easy to get started, right? Like a lot of times everyone is kind of like, oh my God, there's a big hill. How do I climb up? And everyone knows the saying, right? Like a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. And I think AI will help a lot of people to actually take that first step, because the entrance barrier is so significantly low, and it will help a lot of people kind of like overcoming that fear of, yeah, where to even start.
Thank you. Priyanka, what do you think about that?
I think there's specific use cases now in how AI is affecting mental health. On the loneliness piece, that was beautifully articulated. There is a lot of tech coming up in robotics for children who are socially awkward. There's a robot called Moxie that a child can talk to under a certain age, and there's also elder care companion bots as well, which is like two ends of the spectrum where it can help have conversations. So conversation AI is evolving into that. And there's also AI coaches that are coming up, or products that people can build. You can build one even in ChatGPT, create a GPT that's a coach. And so I think this democratizes access to executive level coaching prior, and to bring that to a greater workforce. Now, does it replace human coaches? Absolutely not. It does have limitations, but perhaps it can be a bit of a helper before you or in between coaching sessions or in between appointments, but just have something that can have a conversation with you. There is research on perhaps people taking it a little bit too far in terms of AI relationships and companionship. And I'm not sort of going on that, but when it comes to mental health, I think it's really exciting with audiovisual technology and the image processing becoming quicker and quicker for us to have conversations with digital beings. And perhaps that alleviates a bit of that loneliness pandemic that I feel like we're really in. And in terms of employee resilience, a coach that can kind of, that has been trained in all of the psychology and all of the knowledge and all the research, just is there to support you on particular things in the same way that it can be a helper in different ways. So, but yeah, I'm very excited about mental health. I think the line I draw is it is not a replacement for clinical psychologists, and it's not a replacement for counselors, but it's a helper in between.
I've taken from this a bunch of strategies. I think you've made it really clear why we should try to be resilient about navigating this change. In my work, we define resilience as our ability to navigate change towards a positive goal. And it is easy, I think, for people who feel less affinity for technology to think of AI as a new obstacle, to say to myself, oh my goodness, there was the pandemic, and then and now there's AI, and what's that going to be? But I really hear both of you making a strong case that this is a bridge, not an obstacle, and a bridge that we're probably all going to have to cross. So since that's the case, that's part of why we should do it. But in addition to the kind of unspoken fears, Malte, that you brought up, that my competitors will do this, and so I have to keep up, there's also major advantage. And I'm really attached to this idea that's developed by talking to the two of you, that AI could perhaps end burnout. And professionally speaking, burnout is mostly, not entirely, it's caused somewhat by disconnection, but a great deal by overwhelm. And so it's usually a combination of overwhelm and disengagement. AI, it seems like, could help some people re-engage because it could excite them and make things easier. But the biggest thing it sounds like it can do now, who knows what it will do soon when it's just technology and not something unusual called AI. It sounds like it really could, if we're willing to look at the individual irritants that lead to our overwhelm, whether it is trying to figure out what to make for dinner, or it is coming up with content for our company's social media, or it is writing grants. Leslie in the chat said she really loves using ChatGPT to reword thoughts for grant writing, newsletter writing, donor letters, so it's not all the same over and over again. So if we can figure out what are the small repetitive tasks or irritants that lead to that feeling of overwhelm, we could be really precise in using AI as the co-pilot that will not just make our jobs easier, but will strengthen us, really make us more resilient, getting towards the mission of our company, whatever that is. before we end, I wanted to ask you about the fun side of AI that we didn't really dive into. So I wondered if each of you, and Priyanka, I'd like to start with you. Can you tell me about the funniest or most delightful way that you've used AI or seen AI used?
Yeah, I was doing a training with a bunch of builders, very burly blokes, and I showed them Midjourney, and I made a Midjourney town of the Barbie dreamland, and it was just a
Wait,
really
hang on. What is this? Because I learned perplexity.
Midjourney is an image creating tool, and I basically recreated a version of the Barbie sort of land in a very sort of urban planning sort of context, and it was quite delightful to see their reactions to it. So that was really fun. I love playing around with Midjourney. You can do all sorts of wacky and fun things, and it's another AI application that it's just I use it to create fun birthday cards and all sorts of things in my business as well. But that's one. And the second one is a tool called Suno, which is a song creating tool. And so I've created songs about a whole bunch of things in different contexts, but that's a fun way to interact with AI as well.
Okay, Malte, your turn. Tell me something that you've used AI for or seen it used for that was really delightful.
Frankly, to have more free time, right? You mentioned AI, Dr. G, and you mentioned burnout, and I think that kind of like dials into mental health, right? I run a podcast myself. I run different kind of things, which are kind of like repetitive tasks, right? Like, what do I ask my guests? Like, come up with a plan. Like, I know how much time it takes, to plan a podcast like this. But using AI, you do that. You save an hour of your day. You have more time to spend with your kids. You have more time to go surfing or to enjoy your free time, right? Life is not all about work. We can be creating more, but that doesn't mean we're necessarily being more productive. Productive sometimes can mean to just shorten the time you're working in it, right? And I always see that, oh, like now technology allows us to do so many more things. How about technology allows us to enjoy more of our limited time we have on this planet, to enjoy the beautiful things it has to offer, like nature, go on a hike, play with your kids. That's, I think, what I feel AI is most exciting about.
So I really like that. Use AI so you can surf more.
Yeah, buddy.
Fantastic. Thank you both. And thanks to everybody who is here with us. I know this is a little different than our usual content in this think tank, and I hope it's been useful to you. I know it's been really useful to me. Oh, quick question. I think this is really helpful from Chris. How do you stay up to speed on as new AI tools are coming out? What's your go-to resource for that?
I try not to be distracted by shiny objects. I feel like there's a new AI tool coming out every single day, and I pick the major ones that are useful. And if I find out about them on LinkedIn or the news cycle, I might play around for a minute or two for the sake of, because I'm in the profession. But I generally take a while to adopt a new tool.
So I'm that way with medicines.
Yeah,
I'll give it a minute to see how it's going to go. But I do want to know from either of you, is there a resource? Is there a place people should be watching to see reputable, reasonable suggestions about AI as it comes out?
I would say just follow the news, follow the news. Once it comes out there, like you will hear from it, right? So like, but stop overthinking it. Pick one. I hear people are talking about like, like there's so many different AI tools and everything like that. Try to understand why are you using AI, right? Like start with that. Why are you using AI? What problem you're trying to solve? And then do a little research, right? It's kind of like, all right, I'm trying to fix my Ford Mustang, right? Like, okay, do I need a hammer? Do I need a screwdriver? Like, what situation you're trying to solve? Do a little research on that, and you will find the right answer, right? Don't follow. I like the don't get blinded by shiny objects, right? So like, when it's ready, like go ahead and be there.
Yeah. And if you want to find an application, to your point, use Perplexity or Google and try to go like, I'm trying to do this for AI and get some ideas from the tools themselves. But I would not, I think part of this resilience chat and fear is because people think they need to keep up. And actually it's how it works for you. And a new tool is not the solution, just like a new drug or a new medication is not necessarily going to solve your problem. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? And is this the right solution for your problem?
So
exactly. It's kind of like absolutely right. So Like you're
Yeah.
trying to play music, right? So like, and you like mastered the guitar. No, get like better at playing the guitar, right? If that's kind of like your instrument, right? Like become an expert in the tools you're using rather than following the next trend.
Yeah.
Malte, you don't know it because this is the first time we've been together, but we talk a lot on this think tank about purpose. What are you aiming at? You know, if resilience is the ability to navigate change towards a positive goal, you have to first identify your goal. So thank you for reinforcing that message. And now AI can be one of the ways that we actually use to navigate towards our goals. Thanks everyone for your time and your attention. And we'll see you next month when we talk about why people are so resistant to hard conversations and go into denial rather than moving forward.